This is Tree of Codes by Safran Foer. I've been thinking for quite a while about maybe getting a copy of this book. Not quite brought myself to it. It's very difficult to buy, for one thing. Condition is very important. This is a paperback original, so it's a paperback with all the drawbacks that paperbacks have, or tend to have. It has a cover that is nothing substantial, let's put it that way. I wish they had put a really nice cover on it, but I wish that for most paperbacks, frankly. And also, every page in the book is extensively die cut. So it's a very fragile book. So you can't buy it from just anybody. You're taking a real chance. And there's a fair bit of demand for this book. Not just fans of Jonathan Foer, who has a large fan base, but also anybody interested in art, because the book is a piece of art. People interested in art that have no interest in the book or the story are still interested in this book because of the die-cut pages. Also a big draw, crossover draw for people interested in book design. So there are more people who would like to have a copy of this than there are copies. This is published in the UK, 2 editions. I am not steeped in the bibliographic points of issue on this title, so I don't know that the 2nd edition is substantively different than the 1st edition. It may not be much more than simply a second printing, although it is stated as a 2nd edition on the copyright page. The 1st edition is a fair bit harder to come by than the 2nd edition, but it's not, the prices don't really reflect that. I have not seen a lot of premium on the 1st edition copies, despite the fact that they're fairly hard to find. And I suspect that is due to demand. People just are happy to get a copy, and right now the edition doesn't make much difference. Probably really a very good time to buy a 1st edition. If you can find a really nice one at some kind of reasonable price, that could be a good play. When I started looking more seriously at buying one, a 1st edition was my first choice, but my priority was the quality of the specific volume. And the 1st editions that were available, there were a couple that were priced accordingly and priced to the moon, and there were 2 or 3, maybe 4 copies, 1st editions, that might have been okay, were priced okay, but were in the hands of booksellers that I would not be inclined to buy a book like this from. A book like this, you really need to know where it's coming from. So anyway, I did get a 2nd edition. The copy I got was still in shrink wrap. These are originally sold shrink wrapped, which they really had to be because, as I said, every page is extensively die cut. You just cannot have people handling the book. Um, so I got a copy in shrink wrap, and I paid extra for it comparatively, but it was a pretty easy call to make. The pictures were great. The corners were clearly good. The edges were clearly good. Uh, Everything about it was right. And still being in shrink wrap, once I established it didn't have corner bumps and edge dings and that kind of thing. I didn't have to worry about the text block. Still being in shrink wrap, that is a huge area of concern that I didn't have to worry about. So it was well worth the extra money to get a still in shrink wrap copy. If you're buying in shrink wrap, you need to be careful. Shrink wrap is easily faked. You can take a book that looks great, and if you know how the seams go, if you know if there's a proper way for the seams to be placed, all you got to do is make sure that the seams are properly placed and you're using the same kind of shrink wrap. It's very easy to fake a shrink wrap book so it looks like original shrink wrap, but it's not. In this case, I did not have concerns. I was not an issue in this case. But if you're buying a shrink wrapped anything, and the shrink wrap is important, you need to know where the book is coming from. The shrink wrap doesn't mean anything if it's in the hands of the wrong seller. So I opened this up because I bought it to look at. I bought it to read. So I have opened the shrink wrap. I do want to be able to say shrink wrap is present. That I personally opened this book. If I ever decide to sell it, it will be a plus that I opened this book. I read this book. I'm the one that handled this book. And with the shrink wrap still present, that's a bonus. So I slit the shrink wrap in the center of the text block on the bottom edge and the fore edge, just the two edges, and that's all I needed to get the shrink wrap free. And there's my shrink wrap. The top edge and the spine edge are intact. Strictly speaking, I didn't have to slit the fore edge. I didn't have to slit it all the way up. I could have slid it halfway up, and I could have stabilized it so it wouldn't continue on up. I could have stabilized it with a teeny tiny piece of tape. So if I came up just not even halfway and stabilized it there, that would be enough to be able to put the shrink wrap on and off. So anyway, the shrink wrap I am retaining. Now, I do know a few bits of bibliographic detail on this book. I mean, it helps to know a few things when you're buying a book. You kind of need to know a little bit about it. I had always understood that if the back cover had numerous blurbs, in this case I think 5. Yeah, 5. The back cover has 5 promotional blurbs. It's a second edition. If it has one blurb of, I believe it's 3 paragraphs, one blurb of 3 paragraphs, that's a first edition. And that has always been the shorthand of telling the first edition from the second edition. But it turns out, when I got more deeply involved in looking to buy this, that is not quite the case. All of the second editions have the multiple promotional blurbs. However, some of the first editions also have the multiple promotional blurbs. I don't know, but I don't believe there were two printings of the first edition. I believe it was one printing. So there are, in fact, if that's the case, there are two states of first printing. The first state, first printing, has the single blurb, 3 paragraphs, and then they changed the cover, ran the rest of the run with the different cover. This is not unusual. This is not an uncommon thing to have multiple states of a printing. There are plenty of examples. But it does throw a monkey wrench in what I believed about if it has multiple blurbs, it's a second edition. Not, if it does have, all the second editions have multiple blurbs, but the second state first printing also has it. And I have examples of this in my image library, where I have pictures of the back cover, and I have pictures of the copyright page, and it is what it is. And I've got multiple examples in my image library. So the first state, first printing, one multi-paragraph blurb. The second state, first printing, most likely could be second printing of the first edition, multiple blurbs, and then they retain multiple blurbs into the second edition. The copyright page does state, I'm not going to try to show this on webcam, the copyright page does state second edition. If you've got a second edition, it will say so. So if you have the multiple blurbs and it does not say second edition, it's a first edition. Probably second state, first printing. And the die cut pages, and every page is extensively die cut. All of the reading is on the recto of each leaf. So you're reading the right hand side. If you open the book up, you're reading the right hand side, the recto of each leaf. And so I'm going to show that here. It's a fairly short book. It's only about 135 pages, 140 pages. It's a fairly short book. And one of the interesting things about this, which I should have mentioned already, but there's so many things to mention, this is another book. He started with the text of an existing book. And by removing the text that he didn't need, by die cutting out the text he didn't need, that text that remains is the story of Tree of Codes. So the book itself is 135 pages, so the book was fairly short. Tree of Codes is actually considerably shorter than that because so much material is removed from the die cutting. What you really have here is a very long short story. I don't know what the word count is. Probably barely a novella or a novelette. So here we go. We have a die cut page here, and just to look at the page, you say to yourself, what is going on? It makes no sense. You got all these words and it makes no sense. So the first thing you have to do is figure out how to read the thing. And what you do to read the book, you lift the page there we go. Okay, to read the book, you can see a huge die cut on this page. First page here actually has no text on it. To read the page, you lift it slightly. And by lifting the page slightly, that allows you to read the text on that page. If you leave the page flush, it makes no sense. You have no idea what's going on. But by just lifting it slightly and getting a little bit of difference in distance there, you can read this page very easily. And here we can see the die cut, extensively die cut. Every page is like this. Now the next page, to read it, you need to lift it just slightly. Not a lot, but you need to lift it just slightly so you can read the words that are just on this page. Then once you get used to that, it's fairly easy to read. Although not really, this is a book to be savored, because as you turn the pages, you've got to pay attention to the flow. You've got like 3 words up here and a couple of words here and a period over here and then 3 or 4 words here. So you can't just read the book. Really what you need to do is read the page, the sentence, or a couple of pages, and get the gist of the language. And then go back and reread it. Because once you have the words, you can read it the second time properly. You can read it the way it is intended to be read, which you can't really do just on a first pass. So this book really wants you to slow down and pay attention literally to every sentence. So the next page, we'll skip up a little bit here. So to read this page would be impossible to read. We have nothing over here. On the verso, all of the verso, we have no text. We just have blank pages on the back. But on the recto, we have the text. Again, you need to lift the page just a little bit so that you can read the words you're supposed to read. And on this page, got 8 or 9 lines of text, and it's fairly easy to read the words, but to read them so that they flow and so that they make sense. Really, every sentence you need to read a second time. And for me, that's the real genius here of this book, is you can't just zip through it. I mean, the die cut is really cool. I mean, there's an enormous amount of die cutting. It's my understanding they had a heck of a time finding a book manufacturer that would even take it on. And in fact, this was actually printed in, it escapes me, I believe it was printed in Belgium. Don't hold me to that. I know where it was printed, but it's escaping me at the moment. Well, let's skip ahead a little bit here. Again, on the versos, just all white, no text. Everything is red on the rectos, on the right-hand side of the page. And to be able to read it, you lift it just slightly, and then it's easy to read the words. But although it's easy to read the words, as I said, you really need to go back and read the sentence a second time and a third time to really get the pacing and to read it properly. So that for me is the coolest part of this book, is it forces you to read every sentence two or three times. I had heard that the book was not all that good, and then it's the real genius was the gimmick of the artistic aspect and the design aspect, but the book was, which I don't agree. I think the book is very good. It's just to take an existing book and literally chop out words and write a new story as he's done, is just to do it and have anything make sense at all is an amazing thing. And I think he's done much better than having something that makes sense. I think he's got a pretty good book here. Is it going to go down in my, best books ever? Probably not, but I do like the book. I think the criticism for, well, the book it's really cool. It's a great art piece. It's great design, but the book kind of sucks. The book does not suck. That doesn't mean everybody's going to like the book, but it's pretty damn good. And again, as I say, for me, and I love book design. I love book design. I got plenty of books where I don't actually care for the book that much, or at all, but I love the design. In this case, what I like best is that because of the way it's die cut, because of the way you have to pay attention literally to each sentence as you read it, and read each sentence 2 or 3 times, it really forces you to think about every word in that sentence and phrasing it so and where to put the emphasis. So it makes you work to read the book. And if it was a lousy book, if it wasn't a very good book, that would get old really quick. Though it's not a lousy book. It's not a ho-hum book. Anyway, I've gone on for 25 minutes here, as I am wont to do. So I shall stop. But anyway, this is Tree of Codes. Very cool book. Great design. And pretty good story.